Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining our panel discussion this afternoon. This session is one of many on the packed Leeds Digital Festival events list and is brought to you by DXW Digital and Wellgood. So our plan today is to introduce ourselves, the four of us, start a conversation, and then take your questions. We don't have a fixed script, so we're excited to sort of see how the conversation goes. We're going to be talking about our experiences of delivering projects and running teams remotely. But as I said, that's quite a broad topic, so we'll see how it goes. So please feel free to ask a question at any point during the conversation using the Q&A feature. So all panel members can see your questions when you ask them. And you can also use the chat feature, which people are already using, which is brilliant, at any time to comment, to wave at us, to give you your thoughts. And if you have any practical questions or any technical difficulties, please also pop something in the chat and we'll try our best to help you there. I should also tell you that this meeting is being recorded, although I think you might have heard that when you joined. So I should probably introduce myself first before passing to the rest of the panel. I'm Claire Young. I'm Director of Delivery at DXW Digital. DXW is an agency working with the public sector. We're split between Leeds and London and have 75 permanent staff. We design, build and operate services for government, local authorities and housing associations. And I oversee the teams doing this brilliant work, which is a huge privilege. I'm usually an office-based worker, so splitting my time between Leeds and London. But right now I'm chatting to you from my very sunny living room. And this is actually my 8th week working at home because I had some foreign travel in February. So I had to sort of self-isolate earlier than everybody else. For DXW, I've worked in both the charity sector and the civil service. So I hope to be able to give some examples from all three sectors this afternoon. So I'll pass over to Harry now.
Hello, my name's Harry. I'm lead service signer at the British Red Cross. The Red Cross is a independent organisation. We're the largest humanitarian organisation in the world, and there's sort of like a different Red Cross in each country, and they do different things. They basically sort of tend to fill the gaps left by the market or left by the state. So, for example, in Kenya, they run the ambulance service. In the States, they run the blood transfusion service. Here we give out about 80,000 wheelchairs a year, amongst lots of other things. Before the outbreak happened, I was working a lot on national emergencies stuff anyway. So I think we were better prepared for this than if there'd been other sort of big things to deal with. Before the Red Cross, I worked a lot on like data ethics things, a place called Project by If, and then before that I worked a few years at Government Digital Service as a designer.
Thanks, Harry. Irit, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Irit Pollak, and I'm really lovely to speak to you all today. I'm here with two hats on. One is with Barnardo's, which, as I'm sure you've all heard of, is one of the largest charities for children in the UK, over 150 years old, huge behemoth, over 1,000 services. And I sit within the service design team at Barnardo's, working specifically on a really wonderful project called Care Journeys, which is all around improving outcomes for children in and leaving care. And my other hat is with a tiny organisation, which I founded to co-produce podcasts with teenagers across the world, and that's called WADUP. So it's interesting being in this lockdown phase at the moment, where I guess in the case of WADUP, we work remotely and have always done, and I've never met most of the people that we work with. So you know, basically continuing as BAU really, but in the case of Barnardo's, we're really seeing the challenges of frontline work not being able to happen and having to radically transition into remote working. In the case of thousands and thousands of children and young people getting what they need right now. Yes, that's me.
Cool, thank you. And finally, Will.
Hi, it's great to be here as well, so thank you for the invite. My name's Will Callaghan. and I've got two hats too. My day job at the moment is delivery manager at the Croydon Digital Service, which is part of Croydon Council. And I think I'm not sort of au fait with everything the council's doing, which is, as you know, local authorities are taking on enormous amounts of work, getting sort of food and medicines out to vulnerable people. So I think I'll be guessing at some of that. But the piece of work I have done is sort of delivery manager on an app called Shielding, which basically the council's using to understand who to contact, largely people who filled out the Gov.uk form as do you know what the term shielded means, or is it just me? We're having a chat about this the other day. So the word shielded means anyone who's received a letter from government, so they're in a vulnerable high risk group according to the kind of medical condition they might have. So we built an app to deal with that and help those people. My other hat is a small organisation as well that we founded in Eastbourne. You might be able to hear the seagulls outside. It's called TechResort, and we're almost like a kind of digital band-aid. So this sort of scenario really suits us. If there's a digital or technical thing that doesn't work or could do better, then we're very skilled. We've got lots of different skills that we can kind of bring to a problem. And we've started a 3D printer farm in Eastbourne. We had three 3D printers before. We've got 9 now, and we're turning out about 100. There's 2 types of face masks, which I won't go into detail, but we're turning about 100 of those out a day. So I can tell you all about that and the other things that we do. Yeah, hopefully it's interesting.
I'm sure it will be. Thank you very much. So I guess to sort of kick us off then, briefly touched on it already, but Harry, do you want to give us your kind of experience of working remotely so far?
So I guess I've been working remotely maybe for probably about five weeks now. When the outbreak seemed like it was definitely going to come to the UK, the Red Cross set up like a tactical group that was like run by one of our senior management, and they were basically trying to work out 2 things. Like, one, how are our like business as usual services going to be running? So the Red Cross broadly in the UK does free services, things around health, things around displacement and being a refugee, and emergencies, but more things like terror attacks, fires and floods. So we had to figure out how those services were going to work day to day. And then we had to think about what services we were going to spin up in response specifically to the crisis. And the thing I've been working on is creating a support line for people to access emotional and practical support, which we've just put live today. We sort of had like a private beta, if that makes sense, for phone lines. We've actually just been taking internal referrals. We've only taken probably about 300-400 phone calls so far, but that's slowly going to be going up. And a lot of our also normally when we run a phone line, I think the last time we did one was in 2017 when we had London Bridge arena bombing and Manchester arena bombing and Grenfell. All of our volunteers were able to turn up to a physical office and take phone calls with our equipment, where this time round we've had to try and set up hundreds of volunteers in order to take phone calls from their offices, and for them to be able to get on from the office and from their homes, and to use their own equipment, feel confident in doing that. And actually our volunteer base is much older, and I know confidence with technology doesn't necessarily always fall along lines of age, but there is lots of issues around some of that stuff. So yeah, that's what we've been up to the last 5 weeks, and we're slowly like ramping it up to hopefully be able to take like several thousand calls a week. And some of it's emotional support over the phone. Other bits are also things like forwarding people on to the thing that Will mentioned around community hubs. So these have been like delegated by central government to sort of 200 or so councils to like distribute food and medication. But if someone needs food and medication in the next 4 days, especially because councils are setting up at different speeds, we decided we need to like go and send out one of our like vans to go and sort them out. So that's sort of what we've been doing, but there's several teams we've been looking at as well. Big bit of it has been sorting out like how we make referrals to other organisations and our own regional teams. I keep jokingly calling it like the sorting office, like you have at Royal Mail, because that's sort of what it is. Yeah, and I guess everyone having to get used very quickly. The internet is our operating model, and really trying to understand that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about kind of remote onboarding. I think for organisations, that's something that people can probably, some organisations can put off and just sort of delay and hope that at some point in the future you can make that hire or you can onboard that particular work. But in your case, I suspect, Will, in your case as well, you can't do that. You need to be onboarding people because you need their help right now.
It's probably an area of the council's work that I'm not that close to, I must say. So it's interesting because I think the moment where this really hit home for me, our chief exec, who's brilliant, decided that she was going to do an all-staff kind of broadcast, and other colleagues in CDS tried to work out how to get this to happen. And we're lucky that we've got something called, people sort of swear about it as well, Microsoft Teams. But it's good, and there's some bits I don't quite like, but largely it's really helped us as an organization. If we didn't have something like that, or Slack or Zoom or any of these things, I think we'd be in trouble. But she did a broadcast, which she did one yesterday. I think she did one week before last, and she got on the call, and it was supposed to be half an hour. It ended up being sort of 45 minutes, and people could put questions down the side in the way that this is happening here. And she basically just laid it on the line. And I thought, do you know what? I've never seen anything like this. Like I've been to like all staff meetings and the boss is at the end talking, but I've never seen anything like this. And I think it's really, people are sort of taking, there are Herculean moves being made in all sorts of ways, in sort of culture, in technology, in openness. You're really getting to reach the people who are kind of having these conversations. And I totally didn't answer your question.
That's okay.
So,
it's interesting. I'm writing down things from it, so that's good. I guess I was interested. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
I was interested in whether you've had to set up any teams
remotely.
suddenly, and doing that in a remote context. How that's been at Croydon.
Yes. So I can talk about what's closest to me, and I can guess about the other things maybe that have happened. So we have agile delivery teams, as I'm sure all the panelists have, that are made up of product manager, delivery manager, and devs and user research and whatever. And I think we're lucky that we're very connected as a group already in CDS on Microsoft Teams. And what seemed to happen, certainly from my experience, is that people sort of scramble onto a problem. Here's a thing that we really must do. Who's got time? Who's up for this? Who can lend their skills? And in the first couple of weeks, certainly from my experience, it was very much like that. I saw that I'm doing delivery management there at the moment, so I saw there was a gap with that, and I said, well, look, can I help? I have got other things to be doing, but they can be parked. So can I kind of get on and do this? So that was quite good. I think elsewhere in the council, it's been more organised. I mean, for example, they've got a gold group that meets and they get information from on high. And there are other kind of committees that are really kind of making the decisions. But I think the nice thing about CDS is that we can react. I remember it because I was at GDS as well, and kind of teams sort of flex around a problem. A new problem comes. Was it sort of look sideways or something that Mike Bracken used to talk about? You really do need to look at what's happening and help, and all kind of muck in. And I think that's what we've been able to do. Outside of that, apart from the fact we're on a screen, we've been trying to do things almost in the same way. So we have retros. I ran one this morning, which was it was interesting. We have stand-ups. We do planning. I think that the different thing is it's almost like a design sprint in a day. We tend to do a lot more of that. So new stuff that we do refinement on, that we try and estimate and plan and ship in a day or two. So it's that much quicker iteration. Almost like a 5-day sprint into one day, which is a bit of a challenge, but it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, something I've kind of I'm thinking about a lot at the moment is how how sustainable this is, because I've seen loads of organisations very quickly adapt to working in a different way. And as you said, people just getting stuck in, helping out. It's almost, yeah, it's really, really interesting. I guess what I'm interested in is sort of how this can keep going. We might be in this situation for quite a long time, and some organisations will change and possibly become fully remote in the future as a result of this. Irit, from your experience of kind of running an organisation that's remote, sort of have you got any sort of thoughts about how that's been in comparison to perhaps an office-based role?
Sure. I think one of the things that's really important to remember around digital is that what we need as people remains the same. So working with young people that I'd never met, we spend 6 to 9 months working together, and we have 2-hour one-to-one calls, coaching calls every week. Throughout a period of getting to know someone, their context, what we create user manuals for each other. What's the thing that makes me stressed? What's the thing that I love? What's the thing that I'm not actually a morning person, so I don't want to meet in the morning, or the stuff that we would just do as good practice in a workplace, right? So I guess from that perspective, it's been much easier to kind of continue for various reasons with WADUP. But I think what's really interesting with Barnardo's is what we're really focusing on right now is unlocking a lot of what are really significant barriers for people to just do their jobs at the moment. And I feel really, really lucky to be in a team that is, part of the future Barnardo's team, and already has access, and we just use Google Drive for everything, and we're very used to remote working, stand-ups, agile working. But I guess what's been quite unique about this process for me, before the lockdown, so in the Care Journeys project that I'm working on with a team in Plymouth, we are running a design lab that is specifically focused on reducing loneliness and social isolation for care leavers by care leavers. And we were doing that face to face, so meeting Tuesdays and Wednesdays, working on ideas, developing them, and then just at the point before lockdown happened, we were about to go out and run nature walks and run cooking classes for and by care leavers, had all this great stuff planned. And this is the fascinating thing, I guess, in my experience working with, Generation Z, the flexibility and the norm of them to be working in this environment makes it easy for us to work with young people, and it doesn't matter if they're vulnerable, it's access to tech, of course, which is an issue. So in our case, within Barnardo's, I'm really happy to say that when we locked down and we were about to do these tests with other young people in Plymouth, we decided, well, we can't do a nature walk, so what we're going to do, we're going to get onto Discord. And we're going, which is a gaming platform that's often used to stream and have conversations live. And we're going to stream a nature documentary, because that's within the theme of what we want to do. This is all led by young people. And we're going to invite the young people that we're going to go on a walk with us to do that. And we were able to set that up in a couple of hours. So I think from that's kind of, it feels a little bit like an oasis within Barnardo's, in that we already had the relationships, we were able to do that, and we were working with young people who are really, in lots of ways, the leaders here in terms of how we use digital. So I found that to be really interesting. But I guess just coming back to this unlocking idea, what we're trying to think about now is how we use these small the lab that I'm running and a lot of other pockets of fantastic innovation to create a new standard of remote working for service workers, for amazing youth workers who might not know or have permission to do what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I can see a comment from Tyler, and it actually is quite fitting with my sort of next question, which is, I guess, a few of you have just touched on it there, but sort of thinking about how we maintain focus and productivity whilst working remotely, because obviously our personal and professional lives are blurred, and it's, as Tyler said, it's a lot it's a lot to deal with what is happening in the news and what is happening in our communities at the same time as trying to concentrate on a video call. So has there been challenges around this in your organizations? Have you found ways of sort of thinking about looking after people and their well-being, I guess? Maybe, yeah, I don't mind who takes that.
I guess the only thing I would say is that, you know, we're all going through a lot right now, and it feels like everyone's graph of mental health is like this, no matter who you are or what you're going through or how many cats you have or children or what your health is like. So there is one of the challenges of working remotely is that you can't really see how people are really doing, and you can't see behind this frame. So what we try to do is give people permission to just have an earlier, you know, end day, take a break, go offline, you know, look out the window. A lot of that, I guess, in parallel with, you know, actually expressing how you feel that day, because it changes so much, don't you find? Morning to afternoon to lunchtime, and that's okay, you know. So I guess what I'm finding useful is just being okay with however you feel and being able to adapt to that in the moment.
I think it's interesting. Sorry, you go for it, Harry.
You go first.
Okay. I think so. TechResort, which I've not really spoken about yet. I think it's interesting that because we're doing something that's so sort of frontline focused. You know, these visors are going out and being used by the people who are really in harm's way. Seeing those numbers rack up makes a difference. You know, for morale. It took us a little while. So the interesting thing about 3D printing is it's really fiddly. I don't know if anyone. I'm a total novice, by the way, but we've got some real experts doing this. It's you make the model and everything else, and you think, oh, I'll just put this on the, you know, base plate, print it, and it'll just happen. It doesn't work like that. You have to keep going at it and refining it. So it took us time to sort of build up to sort of our full capacity. But I think now that we are, you know, seeing these things go out, you know, regularly and getting lots of sort of good wishes back, and actually some donations which we weren't expecting, you know, people saying, well, you know, you're not for profit here, have some money, you know, has been a real motivator. I think we're resilient in that a lot of our volunteers are young people, probably the same age as your young people, Irit. So it's sort of late teens. And I think they like being on Slack and Discord and everything else. So, you know, the fact that they can't necessarily go and run around the block, they might not have wanted to anyway. So I think it you know, the sort of tech nerds that we all are, it's not as bad maybe for us as others. And I think there's the usual stuff around at Croydon, having a, you know, the lunch break is almost enforced. Let's try and all have a lunch break between 12 and 1. Because otherwise we'll have meetings during that time. And let's try, even though it's quite hard, to put 15-minute gaps between meetings, because actually, you know, you shouldn't, in an office going from one meeting to another, you wouldn't automatically do it. You go and get a cup of coffee or something else. So let's try and make that happen. I think it's interesting that, you know, people are working at different times. I mean, I've got sort of 2 kids downstairs, and my partner and I are sort of taking in turns to help, which has meant sometimes I'm sort of working later or earlier. I think you have got to make accommodations for that. But what I've tried to do is, when I'm off, is turn all the devices off, you know, and maybe just leave my phone on if it's an emergency, but everything else just goes off. I think you just have to do that. There's a guy, one of my colleagues, Rich, he's a delivery manager as well. He posted a picture. I don't know if he was half joking or not. He said, "This is my commute now. So this is my sofa, and here's a book, and here's a cup of coffee, and I'm going to sit there for 50 minutes like I was sitting on a train." And I'm like, "Hey, are you having a laugh, or do you actually do that?" But it sounds like quite a nice idea. I might actually do that, you know, to have that space between work and home. I don't know.
I've definitely heard, you know, some people walking around the block before they start work, or going outside into their garden before they start work, and just doing something to acknowledge the fact that perhaps previously there was something filling that time, even if actually at the time you didn't really enjoy sitting on the train or whatever you're doing. It's quite important to sort of split, I guess, your days up.
Yeah, totally. Somebody was saying they do that with a book and a pot of tea. Louise,
That.
I do that with my book and a pot of tea in the morning. I think I want to start doing that as well. Joe Wicks also. Do your, if you've got kids, do they? I did it once and I was nearly dead. So
I've
I'm not
heard
sure
a
if I'm
lot
going
of
to.
people complaining about their limbs aching quite a lot, thanks to Joe Wick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think
not
that's a
quite
good
ready
thing
for
too,
that.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So Harry, how have the team at the Red Cross been thinking about well-being? And I'm sure it's already something that is taken very seriously.
So we've actually been setting up 2 phone lines. So one of them is the external facing one for these this sort of 1.5. I mean, I hope we don't get the whole 1.5, but start to help some of the 1.5 million people who are having to stay home, not even go out for food because of like being clinically vulnerable. But we've also set up a support line for volunteers and for staff as well, and a lot of the resources we've been putting in place. So we've created like this like open operator manual for all of our like staff who like answer phone calls, and there's lots of stuff in there about like taking breaks. We've got like a health assured phone line that people can call up. We have like a supervisor system set up, so for every like 10 people taking phone calls, we have a supervisor who's there, who's like a more experienced operator, and is also there to be able to like spot out signs if someone's had a difficult call, and it's also encouraging people to take like breaks and stuff like that. And then in terms of like the product team, we try and make sure we actually clock off at 5:30. We've tried to do it that only 1 or 2 people are actually responsible for stakeholder management, especially with like senior, because they feel pressure from each other and from externally to get stuff done. So actually trying to reduce the number of people in the team actually having to like deal with stakeholders, because it doesn't necessarily help with like productivity and so on. So we try and reduce some of the calm, but then there's also trying to give a break to some of our other members of the team who have to deal with like stakeholder management anyway, and just trying to reduce down the meetings. I think at first there was a lot of meetings and a lot of emails, and I think that way of working, I think people realized just wasn't going to like work, and actually you just have to let go of some control as a senior management and just like let the team crack on with it and just check in with them, rather than trying to do this like physical model of like emails and physical meetings all the time. Just a different thing needs to happen.
Yeah, I guess acknowledging that it's not a like-for-like situation, is it? And I think sometimes I definitely recognise that sort of panic to fill the day with meetings, probably as a kind of reaction to wanting to over-communicate and make sure everybody was involved. But actually, the downside of that is it's just exhausting being on video chats. And as you said, I think there was a nice example of booking in 45 minutes or 15 minutes rather than 30 and an hour, because naturally you would normally have the walking time between your meeting rooms, or you might in a smaller building just have an opportunity to grab a coffee or something, whereas actually if you're sat at your desk and just going from one URL to the next, that's absolutely exhausting. Something we were doing at DXW is I really liked your point about giving permission to the team. I think acknowledging that people are working at home during a pandemic, and they've suddenly become carers, teachers, cleaners, everything in their home, and so the working day isn't the same shape anymore. It's fully okay if your child or pet or parent appears in the background of a call. That doesn't matter at all. And also kind of acknowledging that everyone's handling this quite differently. So already I'm sort of seeing in the chat some people using meditation, some people using cups of tea, some people using exercise. There's loads of different ways of dealing with it. And I guess as an organisation, we have to acknowledge that our team deal with this in a different way. And so we need to almost offer a few different ways to support people.
Croydon have been amazing as an organisation, just really enlightened, and very kind, compassionate colleagues who're thoughtful, who look out for each other. And it's really, because I'm a contractor there, so just until the end of December, but it's it's really liberating and good. There's a difference. We've got different tools to tackle these things. So stand-ups and deployments, we generally need to talk. That's what we would do. So we'll have a video call for that. If there's a knotty problem that a product manager needs to talk to about with a dev and it's easier to have a call, yeah, we'll probably do that. But outside of that, Trello helps, you know, staying in touch about whether work's done. Chatting on Teams or elsewhere has really helped. And I think it's about getting the right thing for the right scenario, you know, and not just hitting the phone button every time you get stuck.
Yeah,
it's tempting. It's right there, isn't it? You're just going to press it. Sorry, Harry.
I was just going to say Trello's been a really useful tool for us. So it's only been very, very recent. The Red Cross has had like open roadmaps. So when stakeholders are asking when are we going to do and have stuff ready, actually just having an open Trello and showing what the epics are going to be and what the MVP is going to be and when stuff's going to happen has been really, really useful. And I think that's reduced a lot of the stress for our product manager I think his phone calls and meetings and calendars are freed up a bit as a result.
Along those lines, what we're trying is we're using G Suite, something called living notes. So as we work on projects, rather than reams and reams of notes, it's just basically a living Google Doc that or Google Slides that we dump all kinds of insights into and make it a lot more dynamic. So it's open and we can share it with people as and when we go. So I'm finding that to be quite helpful too, so you don't have to keep on relaying the same information over and over again. And people can, it's also just about transparency, right? What's actually going on. Not a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, kind of mixing it up a little bit. And I guess speaking a bit like you mentioned about the user manual for me, that's something we have at DXW as well. And we had it before we all went remote, but it's really useful to know when people are at their best, when people perhaps you just shouldn't bother them, or when you're talking about needing to get some information or some feedback across, do they prefer a phone call, do they prefer a Slack message? I guess that's really helpful for kind of building that collaboration and communication. So I guess I'm sort of interested to think about how we're sort of continuing to deliver throughout this. We're all sort of managing in this new situation. Are there any sort of ways that we've sort of changed the way that we're working, or any challenges that we've come across?
I guess one of the things we've been talking about is no big bang releases. I think especially in a sort of it's tempting with the sort of daily updates, the sort of politicians and senior servants do each day, to have some sort of press releasable thing that you've done. But I think we've been trying to resist that, and actually it's made it we actually be able to deliver much more incrementally and actually ultimately deliver more. So I think that's been a big thing as well, not letting ourselves feel rushed to get stuff out the door, and that if ultimately we rush stuff, we'll waste time. And just trying to do little changes each day of trying to improve the service, I think has been really useful as well. And just having a clear roadmap rather than trying to do this ta-da moment. I think it's just it's been working and it's just going to keep working. Yeah, but that's not a particularly new thing for us. I remember Mike Bracken and other GDS people saying that a lot more, no more big releases.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really totally agree.
Yeah, I really like that as an example. I know when I, before DXW, I worked for Comic Relief, and we had Red Nose Day every year, which of course is a very big televised event, and so could potentially create an awful lot of pressure and sorts of anxiety. And actually creating it, we almost had a bit of a control room of people that were calm, and if you weren't calm, you weren't allowed in the room, in order to make sure that we didn't do anything knee-jerk. And we actually probably a little bit different from this current scenario, but we created we called it a playbook of scenarios that might play out. And so rather than having to make decisions on the fly when everyone was a little bit stressed or emotions were heightened, we were able to refer to that and say, look, 3 weeks ago when we were very calm, sat around, we decided that in this scenario we would do this. And it was never a big bang release, because if you've got an audience or if you've got some people using your product, it's probably not a good idea to be doing that. And actually, I really like the fact that this is sort of enhancing that incremental releasing is perhaps the best way to do things anyway. Not only is that sort of delivering value in small amounts, but presumably it's making it easier for people to familiarize themselves with a new thing. If they're using Will, you mentioned earlier a gov.uk form that a shielded person may fill out. If you made a big change to that, that might panic somebody,
Yeah.
whereas a small change actually enhances their experience and might help them fill out that form a bit quicker.
Yes. Let me give you a TechResort example, because I think that's perhaps the best one. So somebody posted earlier that 3D printing is an art form, and it totally is. And it's, you know, you do sort of rough sketches and you work them up, and you kind of, you know, you have ideas about how you're going to do it differently, and the end result sort of emerges. And that's certainly what we found in our work. You know, we're geared up to be, we're mainly volunteers. We're geared up to, I think our motto is almost, we don't know the answer, but we know how to find out, you know. So we'll start, we'll experiment, and we'll iterate, and we're releasing sort of things all the time and trying to get them out to frontline workers. So we managed to get in touch with somebody from, I think it was from the local hospital, and said, you know, this stuff we're making is actually useful. You know, can you put it on your head, and can you tell us how we could make this stuff better? And we got a lot of really good, useful feedback that we were able to do something with. Towards the end of we're all on Slack. Towards the end of every day, Sam, who's one of our directors, and he's sort of leading the sort of technical side of 3D printing, he'll say, okay, I tried this on here. Our 3D printers have all got names after Star Trek characters, by the way. So I think McCoy is the hardest one to work with. 3D printer is a bit crotchety in some way, a bit like the character. And he said, well, McCoy's playing up in blah, blah, and this is what I tried. And this is what I suggest someone else who's coming on shift to try tomorrow. And, you know, we'll work through this in stages, and we'll get to a better result. So it's, if anything for us, it's actually, it plays into how we are. Probably very similar to your not-for-profit, Irit. You know, it's the same kind of idea. We're online anyway. We're iterating anyway.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it depends on what, I guess you see it through engagement, through people wanting to take part. I guess there's one, like in the Barnardo's lab example, something that we've become really aware of over the last 5 weeks is, you know, finding that balance between keeping the big picture. Why are you all here? What are you trying to achieve? It still remains the same, right? I mean, in lots of cases, you know, your mission is still the same, but being really careful, as Harry said, not to do any of these big bang, we're going to release something huge, because as we're seeing, so the young people we're working with are all care leavers and are either living on their own or in kind of precarious living situations. So they're, to be frank, a lot of them are living in poverty at the moment, and their mental health and all of their circumstances changes so rapidly. So we are doing daily sprints because, you know, what you think might work, for example, what we discovered yesterday was, you know, we were having all this emphasis on running tests for other young people, and it became really clear that actually what's really important right now is that the lab team, which is 5 young people, it's very small itself, is like a family right now. And if you consider that the people that we are working with and are, you know, supporting don't have family, that's very, very important to maintain. And they were, you know, a quote was, you know, we could be watching paint dry as long as the conversation is there. So, you know, the extent of loneliness right now for you know, many young people that are, you know, that Barnardo's are serving is profound. You know, if our connection in the lab is the only social connection, meaningful social connection some of these young people are having every week, I think sometimes it can be quite hard to even remind yourself of that. So yeah, and the way that we find that out, you'll get, as everyone would know too, you know, you get very different information when you ask people in a group setting as to when you ask them in a one-to-one setting, if you ask a general question, if you ask a very direct question. So we're trying to research and adapt as we go. and it's really hard, I have to say. You know, you're trying to do a good job, and then you're shifting and moving all the time. So it's I can imagine if you don't have a background in agile or working in it with a design mindset or being super flexible, it'd be really, really difficult right now to be adapting all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I almost feel like some smaller organizations are probably better set up to be adapting quickly, whereas bigger organizations, it's just more people to keep on board and keep updated. I know sort of some of our central government partners who we're working with, I think some of them are finding it really challenging. You mentioned about kit earlier. I can't remember who that was, sorry. And about, you know, being fortunate to have the kit. And then if you don't have the kit, you end up sort of, you know, I'm talking about equipment here, so the right microphones or the right laptops. You've almost got a barrier before you've even started the fact that you're working at home and you need to try and communicate online. So I think, I guess sort of the thinking about those things and being a bit empathetic to other people's scenarios are quite important. There's a comment in the chat about, I guess, balancing the amount of change, and that perhaps daily change is a bit too overwhelming. So I guess it's something about making sure that iterations are frequent and relevant, but also not overwhelming.
And it's also where iterations come from. Are iterations coming from service users themselves? And you know, feedback being responded to as opposed to done to users. So I hate the word users as well, people. So really, I think that also changes, you know, if the dynamic.
Yeah, just kind of to build on that, I guess. So I think all of us on the panel are used to doing research and sort of co-design style activities with the people that are using the services or products that we're building. I guess sort of a practical question, has that changed? Have you had to sort of work in different ways to involve the sort of the end people and users in that, even though you can't necessarily go and physically visit them? Oh, Harry, you're on mute there, but I know you've got a good answer.
Yeah, so we did a bit of research to begin with, but it was just quite difficult, and especially because there were so many different user groups. But on the phone line, because we've taken a few hundred, it's gone public in the last, actually, in fact, today, we can see actually just going through all the case notes and just seeing a breakdown of it as well. So before, we didn't know if food was going to be a big thing, but I think it's about a quarter of the people who call us up don't have enough food in their house for the next like 4 days. So going to a more like quantitative feedback about some of the things we're hearing about as well, and also speaking a lot to our frontline staff. So I speak a lot to our supervisors, the ones who look after like operators like well-being, to understand what sorts of things are people calling up about, like what things are they not getting, what things are easy, what hard. And I've also made my email open to anybody on the support line who's got suggestions for improving some of the tools we've made. So we've made like this, it's a really basic thing. It's just a table of like contact details for lots of different organizations, but in previous emergencies, that's been a big paper ring binder we've had to reprint every day. So now that's just like a table that you can look at on your phone and type in, I don't know, cancer support or something. You can actually find what it is. And making it clear that you were open to feedback, I think, is definitely made that a lot easier as well. But it's also sometimes hard if the user group's really vulnerable anyway, and we don't want to overwhelm them, I guess.
I guess one thing, it's really lo-fi, but we've been trying to, because what happens in large organizations is that there are so many rungs between the people that use a service and the people that tend to make decisions about how the service works. And so we're trying to more rapidly, I guess, through these living notes and through making sure that we're capturing verbatim what young people are saying, doing quite rapid, short surveys, and again, speaking frequently to support staff to feed that up really frequently to the senior leadership team. And that's just so important to do frequently as things change and we notice new trends coming through.
So from a TechResort point of view, I think I mentioned this already, we've been able to put visors into the hands of frontline workers and get direct feedback from them. So I think that's been really, really useful. and with hardware rather than software. You know, these are physical things that we've made. You know, I've got no real experience of that, so that's been interesting. I want to do more of it though. You know, after this is over, a lot more of this. I think from Croydon's point of view, we've always really struggled to recruit people. So I'm delivery manager for the new website project as well. So we're rebuilding you know, all the citizen facing publishing stuff and rewriting as much content as we can. And we've tried to go and reach out to people and, you know, really involve them in a GDS style in what we're doing. We struggle to do that. I think partly timing, but also, you know, a lot of this stuff's very close to home. It's very sensitive. Like, we're going to come back and ask you about a care service that you've used. That's really hard to do. I think what we've been able to do a lot of is get better at analytics. I think Harry was talking about this. So, you know, we're using Hotjar a lot more. We're using Google Analytics a lot more. Search, internal search for the website is giving us a lot of useful stuff. Less from Google these days. I mean, we've not had any good data from Google search results for a long time, but, you know, there's stuff there that we can use. And I think it's just trying to have conversations with the people who are on the phone. You know, so the product manager I work with, Victoria, on shielding, she's been, I mean, you know, she's amazing anyway, but she's, you know, particularly really reaching out to the people who are making these phone calls to talk about what's troubling them, and you know, trying to understand what the pain points are in any particular journey and try to address that. You know, yes, it's harder on the phone, but we've been at least be able to have conversations about it, even if we've not been able to directly witness a person using it. You know, you do the best you can.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. So I've just posted in the chat if anyone has any questions. We're getting some really nice comments and suggestions, but I just wondered. Oh, and now they're all coming through. I regret doing that. No, I don't. So I guess I'm just going to read your comment verbatim, Matthew. So that I believe that being more agile is key, and we need to move away from hierarchical society and adapt and change to embrace it. I sort of agree. I think we're talking a lot about flexibility and ability to change, and making sure that we've got a communication chain that is, I guess, appropriate for the style of things we're doing. So I don't know if anyone else has got any sort of points on that.
I think there's a problem with certainty, isn't there? You know, so if somebody says to me they're really certain about something, I automatically, maybe it's just me. Really? Are you sure? I've sat in so many meetings with senior managers where they, you know, they act like they know what they're talking about, but, you know, a lot of them have never actually sat with a user, understood what a user is trying to do. I'm not talking about Croydon, I'm just talking generally. And almost you need to come at this in a different way and say, well, actually, I don't know. I don't really know. I've got some ideas about where this might go. And the kind of iterative experimental stuff that we've all been doing is the kind of antidote to that. You can't get past it. I mean, you know, this situation we're in, none of us have been in it. None of us know how this is going to end. None of us really know how best to respond. You know, we've got the expertise, the skills we have, and the user research that we do, and the ability to iterate on that. That's what we've got. So I think it's made a case for this kind of work for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Just building on our talking earlier about talking to end users, has anyone got any sort of practical examples about how we might carry out discovery or engagement with the people using our services remotely?
I guess a classic answer is who are your users? So given the audience, you know, what platforms are they on? So in our case, you know, using more Instagram, you know, looking into TikTok, and you know, the platforms that are actually appropriate to the age or demographic. That would be a number one. If the person that asked that question has a little bit more detail, it'd be interesting to explore what they're working through at the moment.
Yeah, I would also say one of my colleagues, John Waterworth, ran a webinar a few weeks ago, actually, and there's a few blog posts that I can share there, the sort of write-up where he talked explicitly about how to run research during difficult times. So I think there might be some useful things there that we could share as well. Okay, so a question from Paul. Have you had to make compromises in what you were due to deliver because of shorter iterations and perhaps other restrictions? And if so, which have been okay to accommodate and which not? Is there?
I mean, sorry, I'm butting in. Compromises. Well, the project I was on before was stopped while we were doing this, so we were building all the new web stuff, and then we weren't. Some dev work was going on, but largely the content writing stopped because our content designers were needed for this. So that's only now we're really starting to get back to it. Well, that's 5 weeks after this started. That's a big one from our side.
A big proportion of our volunteers are over 60. So I guess we've had to adapt where a lot of the volunteers, they will go to these spaces called, in emergency, a space called a rest centre, which like the council has like a duty to set up if there's like, everyone has lots of people to evacuate their home. And they'll call in the Red Cross to like help run those spaces. But given the nature of the emergency, those volunteers haven't been able to do that. So we've had to realise a lot of our workforce and essence, we need to figure out how we can redeploy them in a way that they still make use of it. And I guess that's part of the reason why phone line's been good, because people who are skilled at speaking to people who, at the sort of most vulnerable point in their life, they're able to chat to them in a way that like is useful. So I guess that's been like a compromise, I guess. And yeah, to what Will was saying as well, we've just had people who've just had to like put their ego to side and just put down projects they were working on and really keen to try and get it done, because priorities change and you just have to just suck it up a bit.
Yeah, I guess really good prioritization comes into its own in times like this, doesn't it? And in some ways, I've actually witnessed it being easier to make priority calls at the moment. I don't know if other people's experiences, certainly mine in government and possibly in other organisations, everything is important, except it's not. And so when you actually boil down to what is the most important, or what is, what are the constraints that we're working with, I think times like now help us focus quite a lot. And certainly we're finding that quite a lot in our teams is, once you go through that process, I think initially the prioritization is hard, and as Will said, some projects get stopped, which can be a bit of a shame, but actually once you get through that, I've actually seen an increase in sort of focus in some ways, and almost the fact that we're in this situation, particularly when our teams are remote. I've seen some really nice examples of being decisive, working together, and being able to actually get things done, not necessarily quicker, but in a more a focused way, I guess, which has been quite nice.
An example has just sort of popped back into my head. So it's a bit mundane, but we've got a CRM system that's on Dynamics, and some of it's not content managed. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if this thing was, so we don't have to do a deployment every time we want to change these words here. But that will take 3 days. Yeah, oh, okay. Do we really want to commit to that now and only see the value in 3 days? Or, are the smaller things 5-minute, 10-minute, or half a day jobs that we will do instead? And this 3-day chunk, which really ought to be done, keeps getting pushed back and back. I think it makes you focus on the value you can deliver today. Whereas if this was a 2-week sprint or whatever, you go, well, we'll put that in the sprint, because at the end of it, we'll have that and loads of other value as well. It's something about the value today. And that doesn't mean we're running around, crazily, but we do want to deliver something meaningful today, which means, that thing isn't going to get prioritized at this point.
My boss asked me to put together some design principles for the other service designers. There's 4 service designers at the Red Cross, who normally I'd sort of meet each of them for lunch each week, but we can't do that at the moment. So we've made these design principles, and one of them was just like make practical stuff that's useful. So it's really easy in service design to get up and think about what's the whole journey and figure all of that out and make sure it's absolutely perfect. But actually, you need to balance off with just getting some stuff done, and just doing practical things. And even if it's not a perfect service, actually just improving small bits of it can make quite a big difference. So I guess that is the sort of swallowing some design perfectionism has to come in.
Yeah, I guess it helps make the minimum viable product or the minimum viable thing even more relevant, which is quite nice in some ways if that's being adopted. So we've had a question from Rachel about, have we got any experience of how charities and organisations are sharing knowledge with regards to COVID-19 challenges? I can see a few people in the chat have already suggested I think it's a thing that CAST, the Centre for Applied Social Technology, apologies if anyone from CAST is on the thing, I think that's what it stands for. They have something called We Are the Catalyst, I believe.
Yeah.
But I guess sort of from your communities and your networks, how have you gone about sharing how things are going?
I guess so picking up on that, we spoke to, there's a service design agency called Snook. I'm sure a lot of people would have heard of those guys. They're part of the Catalyst Collective, and what they're trying to do is figure out the ingredients that charities are finding really important to activate right now through the COVID-19 lockdown. So they're speaking to a whole swathe of charities and then publishing ingredients over the next few weeks. So that's quite live and probably worth checking out and just keeping tabs on. The other thing that I'm really cognizant of at the moment is us not all just publishing separate principles for the same things and duplicating everything all over the place. So I'm quite happy that a service design agency and a collective are playing that central role while charities and organisations are trying to directly deliver. So I feel like that's probably the most useful place to be looking at the moment.
From TechResort's point of view, the stuff that we're printing, the models that we're printing, there's a visor called Prusa, Prusa, another one called Clip or Verkstan. I found these things out the other day, and they were created by, I can't remember what the name of the organisation is, but given freely to anyone, models that anyone that wants to print them can print them. So that's what we're getting. We didn't invent these things from scratch. We're working from something that was open source to begin with, which is amazing. There's another group, or there are rather a sort of collection of volunteers in Eastbourne, where we are doing the same thing. So we as a CIC, we had the money to kind of scale up. We had savings to do this, but there's a lot of individuals who are just doing it for themselves. They had a 3D printer in their garage or something and decided to go for it. And we found that there's a lot of knowledge exchange between us. And, we've lent them PLA, which is the material, or given them PLA, the material to use, and acetate. And so I think you have to just give and muck in. It's not, it's not about getting rich off this or anything. It's actually, there's a real point. It's public service.
I like your point about open source. I think that's quite for anyone building products, digital products, well, physical products in your case, I guess. Kind of using things that are already existing seems like a great idea, but also being very happy to make your code available and open for others. I think that's a really it's a good way of kind of allowing for sharing and kind of acknowledging that lots of these problems are being looked at in all different kinds of organizations, and trying not to repeat the effort is, particularly when we've got a lot of other things going on and to do, is good.
We've so for the support line, we've made like this operator manual that has everything from like signposting to like training to a sort of like question and answer if you've got a safeguarding concern. And while it's not been used by other organizations yet, there's been bits of organization I've never even spoken to before who are now like asking how can they get a manual, and now we're working with the digital team to make that like a standard format for everyone setting up phone lines to support their operators, and just having the code open as well, and just not having it behind a login, which is sometimes an older habit we used to have. So actually just making the information open, and suddenly other organizations are using the like signposting thing. So yeah, I think open by default is really useful, especially when there isn't time to call up everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I've noticed is there's an awful lot of things being shared. There's lots of blog posts, there's lots of tutorials. I think that can be quite overwhelming. And so I think I've kind of I've taken to sort of being very patient with people when I make a recommendation that perhaps I've already made before, because there's just so many of these things going around that I think the good ones, you just keep having to mention them over and over again, I think, and kind of accept that people need their information in different ways as well.
Claire, I've noticed there's lots of questions in the chat as well, actually.
Oh, I know.
Sorry, I don't know if you'd
No,
noticed. So
don't,
there and there.
don't worry, I'm writing them down.
All right, cool.
I wanted to ask the panel about remote retrospectives and remote team meetings. There's a question about, I guess, the tools and some of the techniques that you're using in your teams. Who wants to start?
One thing that's quite lovely, one thing we lose when we do things remotely and we work remotely is our senses, other than, you know, touch and smell, and which are very important when we meet face to face. And I was on a meetup last night that was talking about, and we're doing this a bit in the team. You know, so when you bring a warm cup of tea, very, you know, British symbol, or any kind of warm drink to a meeting, that actually has a way of creating a comfort bubble for you. And so we're, you know, creating these kind of rhythms and rituals where you bring like a warm drink to the beginning of a meeting, setting something up that feels warm and is kind of tangible. I think those kinds of things I'm starting to become more and more interested in, kind of get out of that two-dimensional. There's so many things. One of the things as well around team meetings, I think, is not to forget that team meetings and retrospectives and work in general is not to forget to play. We can get very, you know, head down, everything's a crisis, especially when you're working in the voluntary sector, and there are, you know, insurmountable needs right now, but playing and, you know, putting on silly hats and just doing whatever you want to do, you know, pretending your partner or your kids or your co-workers and, you know, being silly. I think that's really energizing for us right now, especially given we know that, you know, this is week 5, you know, or week 8 for some of us now of lockdown. So that being in that kind of panic mode for a really long time, just, you know, the play is a really important part of re-energizing us through this time.
We ran a retro. I ran a retro in our team earlier today, and you can do this stuff with Trello. So, you know, a column for happy stuff, a column for problems and questions, a problem for ideas, a problem for actions, a column, sorry, problem, and then a bit of time for people to sort of write ideas and vote on the ones that they want to talk about the most. And, you know, it's just an opportunity. You know, we haven't got to deliver anything in this time. We can just talk about what's making us, you know, what's bothering us and where do we want this to go as a group. And those sessions have been really lively and chatty and fun. You know, my favorite part of the day. So it's very simple to do this stuff with the tools that you have. I think I wrote some instructions for how you might do a very basic retro if anyone wants them. It was literally make these columns, do this. If that's useful, then get you started anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Will. We'll definitely share that.
I
think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just I think what can be really helpful, and maybe this is the kind of stuff that you have in your instructions, depends on the type of retro, if you're doing things, you know, say on a more regular basis, but giving everyone, say, 3 questions, you know, what to come to it with, you know, so what's one thing that I'm really proud of over the last week, one thing that I've learned, and one thing that I want to do differently. You know, and just coming to it with a little bit of pre-thinking can, like, really enrich the conversation and the reflectiveness of it, really. So that's what we're trying as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Have you done any retrospectives or any sort of workshops online, Harry?
Yeah, we have like a weekly wrap up And we've been experimenting with different things. So I think there's like Miro, that's like a pixelated post-it thing online that you can use. Even just like chat here, we will just spend like 10 minutes, everyone just writing in there what the things are, and then another person will be transcribing those into a doc that everyone can see or sharing on their screen, and then we'll just go through in turn like what things people have brought up. And yeah, quiet reflection I think is quite good because it's easy for the loudest in the room to like chat and stuff. So actually just writing out a list and doing that live can be quite useful, and then everyone gets a chance to talk through what they brought up, and it's the usual stuff like what worked well, what didn't, what would you change.
Yeah. I noticed Trudy is saying that they bring drinks to their team meetings and start a discussion about what they've eaten or they're about to eat, which I really love. I think the other day my team and I had a basically just an online coffee, and we sort of banned talking about work and ended up talking about all sorts of things, from the weekend to what holidays we're going to go on once this is all over, to really mundane things like what is the poster behind you? I can't quite see. And it was really lovely. And actually that was quite a useful thing to, I guess, as a release and as a kind of, it wasn't quite as playful as it could have been, but it definitely had that potential to be, you know, just a fun social thing. And it's part of being part of a team. I'm also seeing some recommendations for a tool which I haven't actually used before, called, is it Retorum?
Yeah, Croydon's trying it for something, although I've not used it yet. I expect I'll get to see it. Annie, who wrote that, is one of my colleagues. I think she liked it. Did she say that? Yeah, very good. Yes.
I think so. I think she was struggling with autocorrect. Which I know the feeling.
Retrial, that's what it's called.
Oh, retrial. That makes slightly more sense. Yeah, there are.
No, it's called Retrium. Autocorrect turned it to retrial.
And there's Team Retro too. Two different ones.
Yeah. Chris is mentioning Team Retro. I've also used Miro. What I would say is for workshops, probably less so retrospectives, because they're often with a group of people that meet fairly frequently. I ran a sort of kickoff session for a discovery recently, entirely remotely with a new team, and had quite a lot of had done quite a lot of planning and was kind of about to use Miro, and we've set everyone up and had trials to make sure that everybody could use it. As Harry mentioned, Miro it's kind of like online post-its. When you've got a big screen and when you're comfortable with it, it's fantastic because you can move things around and you can create maps. If you're working on a Surface Pro, like some of my colleagues were, and you've not used it before, I think it was quite overwhelming. So I'd sort of planned this session and we were about to start, and it just became very clear that people weren't particularly comfortable with the software and it was actually holding us back. And we ended up just using a bit like Living Notes, but it was actually a Google Word document, and collaborating in that. And so that sort of had to be quite nimble and think on the spot there, but it was quite, that worked for that group and that context. So I guess sort of there's all these different tools, but working out what's best for your group is really important.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because we want to use the best tech and, you know, be at the forefront, and sometimes it gets in the way. And it's really good to be able to be to kind of strip it back in those moments. In WADUP, we work with a producer that lives in the United Arab Emirates, and she is not, well, up until actually just now with the lockdowns, we weren't able to communicate with her via video call, because of security reasons. And so we ended up producing an entire podcast with her just through submitting voice notes to each other back and forth, and giving feedback through voice notes as well. So I think there's something really wonderful about, if you think about, well, what is it that I want to achieve, and then you kind of just keep stripping it back to, well, you know, can we just do it through voice notes? It wasn't really designed for that, but why not? Let's just do it. And it works. And I think that's one of the lovely things, you know, when we think about access, like, it doesn't matter how, let's just make it work. So yeah, it feels clunky in the moment, but it feels good when you look back.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. And I guess doing it with voice note is just a little bit more personal than doing it over email. And so you kind of, although you've never seen that person, you still have heard their voice, and therefore you start to kind of get a picture of them. And I guess that makes it easier to collaborate as well.
Yeah, and there's something as well that I feel like we're missing with all of these, video calls. It doesn't give you that much time to reflect and sit and think about something for a while. If you've got a face looking back at you. So I wonder if there will be some new cultural norms with video meetings and remote working, where it's okay to just look down and sketch things out for a while and just kind of work ambiently. I'm sure that people are working ambiently now, just online, but I feel that pressure to just be, have the answer straight away. Whereas if you send a voice note to someone, you can think about it and then reply on your own terms when you want to.
Yeah, I really definitely feel the kind of drain of being on all the time, and also seeing your face. I mean, obviously you can change the setup, but it's quite unnatural when you're in a meeting room. There isn't usually a mirror in front of you, and so it's quite it is kind of quite exhausting, isn't it? So yeah, someone's saying that some people turn their video off, and I guess you have to. There's benefits to seeing people and sort of collaborating in that way, and then there's also lots of benefits for, as you said, having time to reflect and being able to look out the window without feeling like you're being rude, because probably in a meeting room you would do that in a kind of contemplative way, whereas it feels like you need to be looking at the camera all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Got quite a few questions bubbling up here.
Yeah, I think I was capturing most of them as they were coming. There was something around, it's quite a long way back now, it was quite a specific question, but I think slightly more generally, it was about doing demonstrations of products or software remotely. So this question was in relation to suppliers and pre-market engagement, but actually I think probably the question can be a bit more general about doing software demonstrations remotely. Has that something people have got any experience of?
I've seen the way of, I don't like it, perhaps. So with being especially with being a charitable organisation, everyone's always really keen to help, which is lovely. But then there's also just a lot of software will sometimes get pushed onto you, and I think a lot of the time they'll do a demo where they just show you on their screen without actually letting you like have a go with the software yourself. And I think some software, like, you need to be able to actually like see it and touch it yourself. It's a really rubbish metaphor, but it's sort of the equivalent of like asking someone to buy a car without, and just watching the salesperson just drive round the forecourt in the car, like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, can I have a go? Nope, only we can drive the car. So I don't know. I think there's definitely a thing there of like actually give people stuff they can try out themselves, rather than doing just like a demo over your screen. Like, you see a bit more about it, but you just don't get to grips with like whether the thing's actually useful or not. And that goes from like testing with end users to selling software to an organization.
Not quite the same, but show and tells we're trying to continue. But it might fall into your trap, Harry, a little bit, that you can only show we'll show you the key points of this thing. It's probably similar, but what we've tried to do afterwards is encourage people to go and have a go, and really, this is the car, but here's the keys now. Now you can have a go, and see if you can get that kind of feedback. It's not ideal. And everyone, I'm on all of these video things. I've got Teams, I've got Zoom, I've got this. There's too many, and the share screen icon on all of them is different and in a different place. It's like, where is it on this one? I don't know. So there's a lot of fumbling around, but yeah, we've got to work with the tools that we have, I guess.
And just like demos without passwords as well. I think a lot of demos just have passwords on it, and it's just another barrier, especially people who are less confident with technology. It's just another barrier. Just put it on the open web. Obviously don't have real data in it, but just if you can, just give people a chance to, and as long as you make clear it's a test or it's a prototype, then I think that's a good thing. Try and let go of a bit of control.
Yeah, we found with show and tells. So before this, we always recorded our show and tells and often broadcasted them live, because we had team members in different locations and sort of stakeholders in different places. One thing I've noticed is that the Q&A is a bit different at the end. So usually in a in a show and tell, which is often usually fortnightly, and it's to show an increment of delivery, whether it's a product feature or perhaps play back some research. We would normally show it and sort of engage in a discussion. What I've noticed for a lot of the show and tells that we're doing is that we're having bigger audiences, which is brilliant, because I think more people can join. They have slightly different calendars, and location isn't a problem. But the Q&A hasn't really happened until afterwards. There's something we started doing. I guess I quite like your idea, Will, about sharing a URL or sharing a thing and then asking for people to feedback on it in their own time has been quite a nice way to sort of keep up that engagement, and has meant that we could focus on sort of showing or telling the thing that we've done and then letting people digest it. I think possibly some people were quite nervous about us asking a question in a big forum, or potentially it was just because it was all remote, was a bit unfamiliar.
I think almost, in the past we'd have, here's the URL, and you get a screed of changes back, a long list of change this, change this, change this. And what we've tried to do is get away from that and say, here's a URL and I'll call you back, we'll talk in an hour, or we'll talk tomorrow, or whatever it might be. And then you've digested it. We can understand what the issue is, rather than you just going change this to this, less solutions, more what were you actually facing when you did this? Yeah.
I wonder, something that I've been thinking about that, we haven't done it yet, but is I guess within larger voluntary sector organizations, councils, Red Cross, Barnardos, you've got this huge spectrum of skills, and also, a spectrum of digital competence and access. I feel like sometimes our teams sit within these bubbles of, we have access to the tools and to the skills, and I wonder what a kind of a buddying system would look like with frontline workers, or small action learning groups that are really truly blended. So I feel like a lot of it we know enough now that we shouldn't be islands, and I wonder how in this time, especially given we're all remote, us spending time with people that are delivering services firsthand is more important than ever, but on a personal level, not just disseminating information. So that's just a thought in my mind.
Yeah, buddying.
I don't know if you guys have thought about that.
Didn't GDS have a coffee thing that they used to do? So you used to get. So if you're interested in having a coffee with a colleague you've never met before, put your name in the hat and you get drawn to go meet with whoever, and they could be in a completely different part of. It was GDS, so digital people. But I never had the time to do that, and I just think, something like that just be really useful.
We actually,
as an idea,
we have a Slack bot that does exactly that. So you can join a channel. It's called Random Coffee, and every week on a Monday morning, whoever's in that channel just gets paired with somebody else, and then there's just a list generated. And there's no pressure. If you don't want to follow it up, you don't. But it's quite useful because it's almost it's an invitation, I guess, particularly to obviously it's only within DXW, which is a 75 people group, but there are still disciplines. There's researchers, there's ops engineers, there's senior managers, there's junior developers, and what's quite nice about it is it obviously doesn't know who the people are, it just generates a name. And so sometimes it's quite funny because you end up having a chat with your line manager, which is still nice because it is a random coffee, and therefore I guess it invites you to have a wider conversation than perhaps you normally would. But sometimes you get paired with someone that is either new to the organization or just completely, even though they actually only sit 100 meters away, you still don't get to really chat to them that often. So that's a really nice thing. I don't know whether that's something I can share, but I'll see if it's an easy thing to set up.
Nice.
Okay, so we've got maybe like 5 minutes or so left. I know a few people have had to dash off, which is totally fine. Has anyone got any sort of final questions or comments? Or anything, whether it's practical or more sort of general, that we can talk through?
There's a question from, is it Tyler? Or a comment around a user research issue. Honestly, the best research is watching a user in their environment, which is obviously impossible right now. Yeah, true. I had seen some research last year. I'm just forgetting the guys that did it. I mean, this sounds creepy, but I think it says a lot about people, and I wonder what you think about research where there is consent from someone to basically screen record their phone and computer activity, to understand patterns of behaviour, where people are spending time, and you know what's on people's minds. Obviously, that's you know big caveat, consent, and what it's for, but it is really, our online lives do tell us so much about what's going on right now, regardless of whether we're in lockdown or not. So I thought it was an interesting approach.
Yeah, that is, I think we've done something similar with a diary study, where we've asked somebody to just keep a note of how they're feeling or how they are interacting or what they're doing, with regards to a particular service, but perhaps outside of just an hour-long research session. Again, perhaps now might be a little bit too much for someone to be doing that alongside other things, but it's also quite a nice way of getting a richer sense. And often people start to reveal things that they wouldn't have ever said in a research session because they didn't think it was relevant, but actually it's totally relevant. It's just that, yeah, it's kind of in a different context.
Somebody asked me a question about Teams earlier, MS Teams earlier.
Oh, yes, I saw that one, yeah.
So not any, I think it was Mark, not any sort of really sort of bad kind of gotcha issues, but I think if you've used Slack or other, other tools that maybe sort of, what's the phrase, a bit more polished or, but sort of more suited to one job, Slack is messaging for Teams, whereas Microsoft Teams is a bit of everything. I think sometimes, as a Slack user and a sort of fairly new Teams user, it trips me up quite a lot, and buttons where you'd expect something to be is not there. So I think it's UX more than anything else. And I think with all of these things, if you're new to this stuff completely, you're going to struggle with any of it. And really, people need, to be patient when new users join. So I think to Mark, try it and see. It's worked for Croydon. It's made a massive difference to us having it. It's just, be nice if that button was somewhere else or that feature was available here, and it just isn't.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the problems is switching between different applications. I certainly have that, as you mentioned about screen share on video calls. I think I must use about 4 or 5 different pieces of software to basically do the same purpose, but depending on individual preferences or individual settings. And yeah, sort of getting your head around it can be quite challenging. What I would say is if you're in a team, it can be quite good and that team works together quite frequently to sort of choose your preferences as a team, possibly as part of a retrospective. So you can have your suite of tools, and occasionally you might need to join a stakeholder on a different chat function, but at least if your day-to-day stuff is within only a few options, it makes it a little bit easier. Okay.
Just scrolling the questions, see if there's anything else.
I think I've captured most of them. I've asked one of my colleagues, Louise, who's dialed in, to take note of all the questions so that we can, where we've sort of talked about URLs or where we've mentioned organisations doing things, I'll try and draw that together afterwards and share it out. It might be useful for some people. And I know some people are probably making notes themselves, but not everybody. I hope people are sat in their gardens, really, to be honest, listening.
They go in the garden in a minute. Annie, my colleague Annie asked something about is it one thing you'd change or one thing? I missed that. I can't find it now.
That was, I think it was Alexa.
Maybe it was asked twice as well.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think it might have been in relation to different styles of retrospective and the sort of questions that you might want to ask during a retrospective.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
Oh.
Sorry, Annie.
What was it, Annie? Ask the question.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe by way of sort of finishing off, to sort of answer Lisa and Annie's question in one, perhaps we could just sort of briefly talk about, I guess, what parts of this remote world and this remote working we'd like to try and keep when everything goes back to whatever it goes back to, and perhaps I think maybe if we start with Harry, one thing we'd like to keep, and then I know some people have to go, so.
I would love to keep having digital people work closely with frontline staff. I think just getting as close to the problem as possible. I think it's really easy to keep those things separate, and I think just you can just deliver so much more value more quickly if you can just cut some of that stuff out rather than trying to go around the houses. So yeah, hopefully that can stick.
Cool. What about you, Will?
I think our chief executive in Croydon said something around work-life balance, and that we'd emerged from this not being the same organisation as we are now. And I was very taken with that. I mean, me personally, I do 3 days in the office, and then the other 2 days I do whatever Croydon needs me to do from home or other clients that I might have, you know, and I was pretty good at that. So I think more people ought to be able to do that. You know, you don't have to be sitting at a desk 9 to 5 to do all of this. You could do 4 days in the office and 1 at home, or even 3, and you'd probably be more productive as well.
Yeah.
You know, you've got more in your life. You're bringing more to it. You're more present when you're there.
What about you?
I think.
Oh, sorry, Will. I'm being.
That's all right.
Tight.
Sorry.
Okay, gosh, I'm 2 minutes. I guess I'd like us to keep rolling out best practice digital engagement with young people and children, and not be afraid of digital, and realize that we can do it. We can do it pretty quickly too, and pretty well. And if it's not perfect, we can just make it better as we go. So I think it's really exciting. And you know, you can't go back from this. We can only go forward. God, that sounds like a politician. Horrible.
It's true.
It's a good sentiment. I guess for me, we've touched on loads of kind of creative and kind of innovative, to also use a buzzword, but ways that we as teams and we as humans are kind of interacting and making things work for us. I would love us to be able to keep that kind of energy and creativity going with whatever faces us next, I guess. So on that note, I know that a couple of us have got hard stops, so I want to make sure that we finish on time. I just want to say thank you so much to the 3 panel members. It's been a pleasure. It's been lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much to the audience. We've got most of you still there. We lost a few, but we've got most of you through there. It's been a really good conversation. Thank you for keeping us on our toes and asking some really brilliant questions. And I guess thank you to Leeds Digital Festival as well for giving us this platform to have this chat today. As I said, if you have any follow-up questions, please get in touch with me. And I hope you have a really great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.